Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aleš Kuhek, and we will be diving straight into one of Europe's biggest growth markets. Um, we're going to wait for a couple of more minutes so that people do have the opportunity to join us, but still, maybe just for a short introduction. Right now, the EU public sector is awarding hundreds of millions of euros in digital contracts annually. What's important and why we're here today is that the nature of these contracts has changed. We've moved past open source as an alternative to open source as, let's say, a mandate. And basically, following the Drupal for Gov conference a couple of weeks ago in Brussels, the message is loud and clear. Europe is, for lack of a better word, obsessed with digital sovereignty. And between the Interoperable Europe Act and the Cyber Resilience Act, the EU is actively moving away from proprietary lock-in. They want transparent, secure, and interoperable infrastructure. So do we. And for digital agencies and IT consultancies, this is more than just a policy shift. It is a massive business opportunity to build the Euro stack of the future. What we want to do today, we would like to bridge the gap between policy and profit. And doing that, we will be covering three critical areas: market intelligence, from where is the money actually flowing in 2026, the tech, why Drupal is becoming or has become the gold standard for government platforms, and finally the strategy, how to actually navigate the tender process, use partnership to win bigger bids than your or our headcount might allow at this moment. To guide us through all this, I'm joined by two people who are truly at the heart of this ecosystem. First, Sachiko Muto. She's the chair of Open Forum Europe and a board member at the Drupal Association. That's just two of the titles. She will definitely add some more to it. Sachiko is the bridge between the regulators in Brussels and the, let's say, developers in our community. And if you want to understand the why behind the EU's digital strategy, she's the definite ultimate authority. Stefan Morko, PhD, he's the CEO and founder of Hermix, win public contracts with AI. Stefan is an IT engineer with 25 years experience in public sector sales. Currently, he leads Hermix, an AI-powered SaaS platform for tender monitoring, market analysis, and public sector intelligence. Basically, he's here to show us some numbers. And finally, why AgileDrop is hosting this. As a head of client services at this company with a headcount of somewhere around 80 people at the moment, I see the same challenges week in, week out. An agency wins a massive government contract, and then reality hits. Projects are technically complex, there are rigid deadlines, and require enterprise-grade security. At AgileDrop, we act as a reliable partner for those agencies and consultancies. We don't compete with you. We empower you by providing the specialized Drupal and PHP talent you need to scale instantly. We help you eliminate the resource risk of large tenders, allowing you to bid with confidence, knowing you have a world-class development team ready to deliver to the high EU standards. Let's go into the details. Sachiko, let's start with the Brussels vibe. How has the push for digital sovereignty changed the conversation for businesses in the last 12 months?
Thank you, Alice. I have some slides, and let's see if this works. Can people see my slides? Yes, it works.
Yes.
Some last minute panic. Every time there's a new platform, you think that 15 minutes of prep is enough, but then turns out not quite. Really happy to join this conversation today. And Alice, you talked about this digital sovereignty obsession, and I definitely want to help turn this obsession, if you will, into concrete demand for open source and as a business opportunity for open source companies in Europe. The reason for showing this slide, a few more things about me, is really just to kind of make the point that I've been talking about open source to policymakers in Brussels since 2007. I'm also a researcher at Sweden's state-owned research institute. So I've really been in the space of research and advocacy for open source for a long time. And I've been around before when we have had high-level ministerial declarations endorsing open source. I have also seen, in some cases, we have seen national level legislation mandating to various degrees procurement of open source for digital services. So, but I have not always seen this high-level wording actually translate into increased demand for open source. And sometimes the knowledge about these policies and and regulations have actually not trickled down to those procuring the procurement officers and the contracting authorities that actually are responsible for public purchasing. So what I want to talk about today is really about why I think this current obsession, as you call it, Alice, why this is different. I think it's different, obviously, because previous policies around open source they were mainly driven by a desire for cost savings, even though the arguments against lock-in and open source also promoting a more competitive market and increasing choice for the user, etc. Those mechanisms were always there, and actually something that I've personally been advocating for using open source as a way to promote innovation, fight against lock-in, and also promote a more competitive market. Now these mechanisms, if you will, have been lifted to a different political level, and we don't have to go into now. Everybody is aware of the current geopolitical pressures and changing situation, and I think that we're seeing this sort of momentum already happening, but I think it's growing, and the reason why is that we see we have this revision of the Public Procurement Directive on the table, launched the revision, sort of the procedure launched in late 2024. Focus was on social procurement, green procurement, but very much now the focus will also be on introducing and defining criteria that take into consideration sovereignty concerns as well. So this is something very concrete on the table. We saw in October last year, the European Commission publishing a call for tender for their own cloud services, 180 million euros, I think, and accompanying that call for tender, producing this cloud sovereignty framework, which I think I was very happy to see this. It shows actually a level of sophistication and awareness around sovereignty that I think, if taken on board, would actually prevent sovereignty washing. There's a lot of, it's not just about having an open source mandate or a requirement, but it shows really that open source is a key component and of sovereign digital services. So then we have upcoming, there's going to be in 2026, both something called the Cloud and AI Development Act, which is going to come with procurement guidelines. Again, I think the reason they're talking only about cloud is historic to some extent. it has to do with, who is responsible in the Commission for the legislative proposal. It has to do with several years of the Commission being focused on the lack of European companies that are competitive in the cloud market. So, but I think it's going to apply across the board for digital. And then finally, there is this upcoming, there's just closed a consultation on something called an EU-wide open source strategy, which looks like it's going to translate into sort of an industrial strategy for open source. So again, my point here, I'm going to hand over to Stefan for his intro, but hope to get into some of these things and not make it into too much about policy and legislation, but really see how this can translate. And the opportunity is there right now, actually, to some extent. The political will may not have translated fully into text, in actual call for tenders yet, but I think the awareness is there, and the opportunity to mention these things when you are responding to a call for tender is already there. So again, just preparing for this webinar, I found this headline from just a few days ago, showing again how Gartner expects that this concern, the political concern for digital sovereignty, is actually going to create a significant demand for sovereign services. So that's my intro. Hope it wasn't too long. I hand over to Stefan, and looking forward to the rest of the conversation. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Sachiko.
Hi, thank you for the invitation and organizing this. We had a couple of discussions during the past few days together in preparation of this meeting, and I think we are touching on some very great topics. As Alex was introducing me, I'm a software engineer. I'm a tech guy, and develop, mostly backend data stuff. A bit of a geek, but I've been doing public sector sales and large framework complex projects for European institutions or international institutions or governments for very many years. And we like this sector a lot, especially because it's huge. The public sector, the budgets in the public sector are something like 53% of the European economy, right? And the projects have an important impact on the economy. And the reasons for which public institutions, international, European, or national, are choosing to implement various projects is not only it's not only reasons and criteria of efficiency. It's also important to take into consideration how should I put it, horizontal or societal needs, out of which we had a few already mentioned here: things regarding sovereignty, things regarding maintainability, and social impact, and so on. So we are in a huge industry, in a huge vertical, and we need to look at it. And the mix of open source and in the public sector is something strategic and important. And this is what we have been doing, like forever, public sector. And 4.5 years ago, me and my colleagues, my partners, we were looking into this beautiful market. Now I'm introducing what we are doing in 1 minute as well. We were looking into this beautiful market, and we were like, okay, it's very important, but how do you find tenders? How do you find opportunities, and how do you qualify them? Because it's absolutely huge. There are significant numbers. We have 3,000 new tenders every day. We have 14 million contracts in our database, in the historical database. So it's huge. How do you find the relevant one? How do you decide which is a target buyer or a relevant tender? And the answer was, we need to build such a tool, and this is why we are building Hermix. It is a platform that helps companies win public sector contracts. We are obviously a data company, a data platform. and we are crunching huge amounts of numbers in order to make sense of this data. Our aim is obviously to make a tool, a smart tool, kind of like this robot in Star Trek that is very efficient. Part of it's that colleague, part of the sales and bid teams of companies or procurers that is very smart and efficient, not always empathetic, doesn't read between the lines, but is able to analyze millions of historical tenders and hundreds or thousands of technical requirements just in seconds. In a few words, what we do is monitoring and analyzing tenders from all around Europe, from national authorities, regional authorities. We are covering the entire Europe, pretty much. A lot of European institutions, international institutions, NATO, United Nations, Interpol, and so on and so on, and detailed local, regional, central, federal, national data from a lot of countries and obviously European institutions. The most interesting thing that we do with this data is that tenders, pretty much, is we analyze it and we create smart profiles. We clean up the data in order to provide smart profiles of potential buyers, potential partners, competition, and tenders, including analyzing with AI tender specifications and requirements. And obviously, we do a lot of strategic market intelligence, answering to questions such as who are my best partners or my best potential customers in a market. We are working with a lot of IT companies, big ones, small ones, and startups even. All the big guys, a lot of the consultancies, globals, telecom companies in Belgium, Luxembourg, Greece are working with us, but also companies in non-IT. So coming back, we were mentioning earlier to the topic of today, we were mentioning earlier the first topic as market trends regarding the European public sector digital contracts. I was telling you that it is a huge market, and as examples of what I mean about what it means, the public sector IT huge market, and I will just showcase simply live Hermix reports. We are here, for instance, it's the analysis of all software services contracts and software packages for European institutions. So mostly Brussels, Luxembourg, but there are agencies all over Europe. You have here 10 years of trends of evolution. We are talking last year about tenders in the value of 7 billion, 171 tenders, 7 billion. So this is one of the markets that we analyze. And here you have the list of the players in this market. You have more than 100 agencies. For each of them, we have numbers of contracts that they tendered for the past 10 years, or you can filter, narrow down to 1 year, and so on. So we have Digit, the Directorate General for Digital Services. They had 20 tenders of 10 billion. I want to underline how important this market is. And here's the analysis by geographies. As I was saying, Luxembourg and Belgium host most of the European institutions, and you have also analysis by other criteria. The same type of analysis, for instance, you can do for other markets. This is an example for Benelux. So if you are looking in Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg for the same IT service contracts, we have 10 years of history. Last year we had 14 billion in the value of these tenders, in 2,000 tenders in these three markets, and we have again the biggest spenders and so on. And exactly the same you can do to find out who are the actors, the suppliers. For instance, these are the suppliers of IT services, only services for European institutions all over Europe. This is the bubble chart. Let me make it bigger to be clearer. We have NTT, Everis, Atos, Accenture, CGK, a lot of these companies. We already work with them and they are our valued partners and clients. We have Capgemini, Kronos, and so on. So this is the map of the suppliers in this country, in this market. These are the countries from where they deliver these services as a map, as a chart, as a data view. exactly the same analysis, for instance, for Belgium. These are the biggest players in Belgium of IT services. How we are able to get this data, as we are saying, we do a lot of data cleanup. If you go to Google or if you go to one of the procurement portals and you try to find the contracts of one of these companies, like, okay, let's take Atos, for instance. You will find 200 companies, each of them with different addresses, phone numbers, VATs. It will take you maybe 3 weeks to dig into the data of Atos and clean up the wrong data about Atos and get this kind of analysis that you see here. We have information about 3,000 of historical contracts. This is their business all over Europe, in all the countries. I have a filter on Belgium, but let me look at the entire Europe. So this is their business all over Europe, in all the European countries, and even beyond if it is European funds or a source that we cover. This is what they deliver, mostly IT services, but also other things. This is their market. So you have here main clients by country, networks of clients, and so on, and even competition or partner analysis, and so on. So in order to be able to get this kind of analysis, we clean up the data. And the data accuracy is super important. So, but how do you find the tenders? This was the second topic that we wanted to touch today. You have all these data sources all over Europe, everywhere. This is how, for instance, if we were interested in Drupal tenders published from last year on, we have here just write Drupal, select what market you are looking for instance, European institutions. I have 2 tenders that mention Drupal for European institutions for the past, during the past couple of years. This is the first one. This is the European Institute for Gender Equality in Lithuania. They had a 1.5 million tender. It was for Drupal. These were the winners, the companies that won. This is the commercial context, the profile of the authority, the past suppliers, 12 suppliers of relevant similar services. We want to work with these guys, and partnerships is an important topic when we talk about public procurement. And we have the geographies of the previous suppliers: Belgium, Greece, Lithuania, Slovakia. Makes sense, looking at the location and the type of authority. The previous relevant related tenders. So we are looking at 10 years of past projects that might be relevant, because we want to see what other technologies are they using, what are cloud are they using, what other platforms, portals, and so on. And also we have the technical requirements. Again, accuracy is the key, and data quality. We have the documents for a lot of these sources and tenders downloaded. We analyze them. We got the budget, the volume, the criteria. So this is analyzed with our AI already. You have also a chat. You can talk directly to the tender. The same for this other one. What is this? The European Foundation for Improving of Living and Working Conditions. You have the previous winners. You have the commercial context and the summary of technical requirements. Let me move very fast forward. Another example of how to find relevant tenders is keywords, right? A lot of the authorities do not specifically mention the name of a technology in a tender. So they might say, we want an open source web site management or CMS. This could be the way they would write a specification, not mentioning specifically that they want SharePoint or Drupal. So we need to be smart about the filters. For instance, this is a combination of keywords such as Drupal, CMS, website. Looking at the market of Benelux, France, Germany, what kind of tenders did we find? How many? 259 during one past year. And I was looking into one of them, which was quite interesting. This one, this is not awarded yet. It's a tender, not awarded yet, not even submitted yet. You have 1 more month to submit it. It mentions one of those smart keywords, and you have here the commercial context. This is in Netherlands, right? The previous 5 winners of relevant similar contracts. It might be a good idea to talk to one of them if you need a partner. And this is the summary of the technical specifications. What do they want? So for this authority, redesign, redevelopment, CMS, and so on, with the word criteria, what they want to read, 1 million budget, what they want to read in the technical proposal, criteria for being eligible, 2 million insurance, and so on. And exactly the same, for instance, for the word open source. So another idea of a smart search to be relevant in this field would be to look at software services standards in Benelux, France, Germany. This is the filter that I selected here. And just looking for also the keyword open source in the same tender. So we have 89 relevant tenders in the past 1 year that are answering to these criteria. And this is one of the examples. This is Belgium. This is the government of Belgium, the Ministry of Finance. I think the tender is also, no, it was closed 2nd of February and not awarded yet. This is the commercial context. Typical players, actors in this market, 57 companies have provided relevant similar services before. And again, this is the summary of the specifications, what they want to buy. 90 million, wow, this is big, and turnover requirements 9 million. This is one of the problems that smaller companies have on this market. They need to have 90 million turnover and 4.5 million balance sheet. And the last thing, which is something that I don't know any platform to be doing this. We are analyzing the documents. I was telling you earlier, we look at actually the documents. So if we search for the keyword Drupal, for instance, here we found 1,120 documents in our database where Drupal is mentioned. And this is important because some of these keywords appear in a technical annex. So you have technical annex 27, where it's small, written in very small italic font. Our website is now on Drupal. Well, this is a key information, but it's usually hidden somewhere in the technical annexes. So we do this as well. We look at PDFs, docs, Excels, and we look for keywords there as well. There was a question from David. Yes, it is quite interesting, and I think this is mostly because in the search for tenders that I did, we are looking in the text of the tender. And as I was saying, the technologies are very rarely written in the text of the notice itself. That's why we also have search in the tender documents. So I was also surprised to find only 2 tenders that mentioned Drupal, but I was searching only in the tender notice. So it makes sense. This means that it is the main topic, right? So it's like in the title or in the description of the tender.
Can I come in? Actually, I have some very fascinating presentation. One thing about the fact that technologies are not mentioned, I think it's something that we have tried, or as Open Forum Europe have provided this input to the Commission in the context of the revision of the procurement directive. Is there is a prohibition, understandably, that one should not mention proprietary technologies or specific companies, right? So you don't want to specify that you want X number of, licenses from this proprietary company. On the other hand, we have tried to, and I think that that's the reason why there's also this kind of reluctance to mention up front. And I think that what you're showing there is very interesting, that because if it's in the technical annexes, where you actually understand what the contracting authority is actually looking for, that means that it's not completely open. They are maybe locked into some existing technology. It's just that there's a reluctance about being upfront about that. But to come back to the point, that I think what we would like to see in the procurement directive, the revised procurement directive, is the possibility to mention open source technologies, because it's not equivalent to mentioning a company that uses proprietary technology, because you are not choosing a specific vendor. In fact, it should be similar to having standards-based procurement, where you actually create a bigger market and a possibility for companies to compete on a shared technology, as long as that is open. So again, I think that it's interesting to see that that you're able that technologies are not mentioned, but actually oftentimes there is a technology that maybe the contracting authority is already locked into, or probably looking to continue using, etc. So very interesting point. The other thing is about, I'd like to see, of course, in the future, the word sovereign, not just open source, because I think that what's going to happen, I think, is that there's going to be sovereign, this notion of sovereign procurement. And what I'm hoping to see is that open source is seen as integral to that. But I don't know if you have done this kind of analysis of this term being used.
I would like to add something related to mentioning technologies or brands in tenders. So indeed, in the European procurement general legislation, and it is implemented at national level by all the member states because it is mandatory, there is an umbrella prohibition from mentioning specific brands or technologies. So when you are buying police vehicles, you are not allowed to say, I want Mercedes. It's forbidden. You can put technical specifications, the length, the power of the engine, and so on, but you are not allowed to say it has to be it's forbidden. But there are exceptions, and there are three levels of at least levels of exception. One is if and there are also additional procurement models where the technology is chosen beforehand. So sometimes the procurement procedure includes a consultation before, where they choose the technology before, and if this was done transparently, then they lock the technology before the final tender. But coming back, exception one, when they are already locked in a technology, it's a fact that buyer, an authority, can be locked on a technology. For instance, they worked for 10 years on their website, everything is on Drupal, and they have 1 million documents on Drupal. And by the way, this is the case of the European Commission, and Ales knows very well, because I think you have very nice projects with the European Commission on Drupal. So at this moment, Drupal is the standard technology for all the websites of the European Commission and most of the agencies. So when they will buy a new website or services for development or maintenance of a new website with very few conditions, they will say it has to be Drupal, because that's they have 400 portals on Drupal. They will not do another one on a different technology. Then so this is one of the exceptions, and it's.
But I think that's. And I just, if I can interject, I think that the point should be made that there's a qualitative difference between mentioning an open source technology, specifying that a vendor should be basing it on something that is an open source technology, versus mentioning a proprietary brand. There's a difference because you are not locking the market. You are not choosing a specific vendor. So I think, that this distinction should be clarified. Yeah. For me, it's a distinct difference.
It's true, but my example was extreme. DG Budget is using SAP as ERP. When they will do a new tender for the maintenance of their ERP, they will buy SAP maintenance services, because they will not change their ERP for a new tender for next year. So this is another example of lock-in. I gave one for Drupal for Digit websites, and it is clearly a lock-in. They will not take another open source solution for the next foreseeable future, maybe 10 or 12 years. Until 10 years ago, they had Documentum. By the way, they were locked on Documentum, but they decided they had to move out because Documentum was discontinued, and chose, after a significant analysis, they chose Drupal 7 at the time. They migrated 400 websites from Documentum and from ColdFusion to Drupal. Now they are locked-in on Drupal for the foreseeable future. So the second level of lock-in is not so strong. You will find somewhere in the technical annex the current technology stack. the current technology stack, this is how they phrase it, it will be in a technical annex, it is not mandatory. So they do not specifically request you to provide Drupal, but they will tell you that they already work with Drupal. So it's your choice. If you want to come with a different, technology, you can, but you probably will lose points, at least subjectively, because they are already working with Drupal. They don't want to see another technology in their mix. And this is a second level of lock-in, which is not a strong lock-in, but it is a subjective evaluation. The evaluation committee will favor Drupal because they already know Drupal. And the third level of preference, I would say, is even not written. So what if they ask for a website and they don't specify any technology or any technical requirements? They just say, we want a website. And then the first thing that you do as a commercial guy as a commercial person trying to sell services to that authority is to find out what's the technology of the current website. And they don't write this in the specifications. So you go on their website, you do right click, and you see, is this Drupal or is this, what is this? And this is a very soft preference, because, for instance, the buyer might have a very bad website or a very bad CMS. The solution can be terrible, in which case, if you look at the website and it is very, very bad, it could be a smart choice to propose something else. To say your current solution doesn't work, you write in the proposal, and I did this in my career a lot of times. You write in the proposal stuff like, your current solution is not working because of this, that, and that. It is slow, it crashes, not maintainable, and so. And this is why I propose a different solution. But if the current website is good and it works correctly, it makes sense to keep the current technology. So this would be a soft preference for a technology. And sometimes you cannot find out just by inspecting their website, because it could be a private CMS. They could be tendering for their intranet CMS, in which case you cannot inspect it. In which case, it makes sense to research the context of the buyer, to look at the past 10, 20 tenders and to see who won them and what technology they proposed in their proposals. One trick could be to see the past winner. Let's say there is a past winner for the past 8 years of CMS development, and you can look at the company and you can see, is this Microsoft? If it's Microsoft, they obviously propose SharePoint, but maybe it's a partner. Is this a partner of a specific company or not? So these kind of tricks help you understand the preference of the customer by looking and reading between the lines. But how do you get between the lines? You need the lines. So this is what I did myself, and this is what Hermix does as well. You look at the past winners for the past 10 years, and you look at their profile. Is this company a supplier of open source? Do we have here, I don't know, Agile Drop? Okay, we know what they propose. We know their preferred technology. This already tells me what kind of solution might be preferred by the customer. So this is the 3 levels of finding out about the preference of the customer. And obviously, you can also work to convince. And there are most of these tenders are actually there is no preference for most of these tenders. From my experience of working with European institutions and international institutions, for most of the tenders, they are open and they are like, we want to see what we have on the table to evaluate, and we will choose the best solution. And by the way, I have to continue. I forgot about the second question, which has 2 parts. Is there a policy preference for specific software, such as open source, for European and national institutions? And yes, the answer is yes. The European Commission sometimes writes in tender specifications, we prefer an open source solution. They clearly write it. And it is a non-functional technical specification, perfectly valid. It's a policy decision. They want an open source solution. It works. It is there. It happens. Not always, but they can do it. And also sovereign this is even more in the recent years. It appears more and more. We witnessed recently the European Central Bank issuing hundreds of millions of tenders for the next digital euro. So the European Central Bank is preparing to migrate in the next years to the digital euro, right? And the ECB budgeted hundreds of millions for this project into several tenders. Well, surprise, even if they did it 3 years ago, before sovereignty was a hot topic, they did it 3-4 years ago, all these tenders were specifically requiring that the suppliers are European companies, and more than that, controlled by European entities. Which for me was a first. I saw this kind of requirement only in defense or security tenders, where obviously dependencies are avoided. But the ECB did it 3-4 years ago for software and consultancy tenders, and I guess we are going to see this kind of requirements more and more. We were talking, I think last week, about the examples from France, and I would invite you to elaborate on this.
Yeah, is that an invitation to me? I had some more slides. I think I'll share them. I think I probably will not. I will not use all of them, but it is definitely sort of about this this momentum. And for a few years, we've already had this kind of theoretical, I would say, discussion around digital sovereignty. What does it mean, etc. And I think that starting from probably a year ago, but really accelerating in the last 6 months or so, I think that there are signs that this is going to be operationalized more and more, which means that which will be translated into text and actual search terms, but also into requirements. So the momentum, or the kind of impetus behind the procurement directive revision, I said, was being able to list non-price criteria, having that be more integrated. It's already possible, but the Commission wants to promote it more. And I think that we talked about green procurement, social procurement, etc. And now we're going to hear more, I think, about sovereignty, digital sovereignty procurement. And so how does this become operationalized? Because I think that's the important part. And I think there, I mentioned already in my opening slides there about the Commission's own tender back in October, and this cloud sovereignty framework, which got me very excited, because it's, again, not going to be just procurement where they might mention open source because there's a requirement, a sort of a policy requirement to mention open source. It becomes kind of not very, very meaningful, I think. What we saw in this cloud sovereignty framework reflects, I think, quite a sophisticated understanding of what it means to have control over your digital assets. And again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I think what it means is that it's not going to just say open source procurement. There is wording in here which shows what policymakers and the public sector understands as being important criteria for being able to achieve this digital sovereignty. And I think it does create opportunities for open source companies in Europe to, in their response to call for tenders, really hone in on some of these aspects, which includes value creation and jobs, local jobs in the EU. It also has to do with not being locked into a technology, which is more than just a kind of economic concern. It's about this notion of resilience or sovereignty. So again, I think it's not an open source framework, it's a sovereign framework. But in the wording, you see that what is meant is that open source and having access to source code, documentation, etc., is seen as one of the key components of this. And for me, also very valuable compared to some previous policy documents we've seen, is that this does not allow for just a regular type of procurement where you procure services or technology that is developed by one company, and at the end you put an open source license on it. No, there's a lot of focus also on the importance of having a healthy ecosystem of both of suppliers, but also obviously having this kind of skills available in Europe, etc. So from my point of view, it shows this kind of understanding that I hope will be adopted in other pieces of legislation and policies. And this is what I've heard as well in discussions in Brussels. The Commission talks about this was a framework developed for their own procurement of a specific call for tender, but really you see similar. There is a kind of alignment with initiatives in Germany and in France. As mentioned, there's the Deutschland Stack, which is also has open source as kind of a key component of what it means to be digitally sovereign. And so I think just to mention again how in the last year or so, open source has gone from being, niche to some extent into something that is becoming quite strategic. And this call for evidence from the European Commission closed just a few weeks ago, but we should be expecting this kind of industrial strategy focused on open source coming up in 2026. And they're, really tying this to the highest political objectives of the European Union, and again, understanding what open source can deliver in terms of control and sovereignty, and that it needs to be built also on this bigger ecosystem thing. So, I just wanted to say that for me, this is maybe kind of sharing a personal story, but I've been involved in open source and public policy for, like I mentioned, since 2007. I joined Drupal, the association, Drupal Association board about a year and a half ago, and I've had this moment where I've gotten really excited about open source again, because I've been telling a story about what open source can deliver for the European public institutions, and with Drupal, I really see that actually it's not just a story. It is actually that's something that exists with a truly global ecosystem, and with a significant sort of contributor base in Europe, and specifically where you see this competition between Drupal agencies, which is really the kind of opposite of single vendor open source, which can also lead to lock-in actually. And so I think, seeing this kind of awareness from the policy level, I hope that can translate into demand for open source, but not just the code with an open source license, but open source technologies that are backed by this open governance and a healthy ecosystem. So the point, I think we're coming up. We should also take some questions, I hope, from the audience. But I just want to say that I think often in this kind of Eurostack digital sovereignty discussions, there is this notion that we have to build something new. It's a bit like with standards. They always say, oh, we need to have standards. The standards exist. Open source technologies exist. Alternatives often exist. And I think that what I'd like to see and promote right now is that this kind of sovereign solutions, etc., is not just in the future. There are alternatives now, I think, and even if again, this kind of policy objectives are not reflected in call for tenders in the text. I think there's an opportunity to study the language used in things like the Sovereign Cloud Framework and really tailor offerings, using some of this language, because that is going to resonate, I think, increasingly with public sector institutions. So yeah. I don't know if
Thank
Alex,
you.
if you want to.
Thank you so much. You can also encourage everyone to type in their questions. I have one, maybe building on our experience, how we got involved with our first European Commission project. You probably feel the Drupal ecosystem by now. Those are smaller agencies, smaller companies that operate within that system. And one might, how real is the concern that the big four, or those, I don't know, let's say 10 biggest consultancies, have a monopoly on those projects? And basically, for us, for Agile Drop, as a maybe 60 people back in 2020, when we were first approached by such a bigger consultancy, we were approached because they were looking for a specialized Drupal partner to join them in the tender. Is it? I mean, do you see that EU is actively trying to diversify that vendor pool, or is it still the bigger the better? The size matters more than, let's say, in terms of open source contributions, a 20 people big company from, I don't know, let's say Austria or from Germany, their open source contribution to Drupal is way bigger than probably those 4 big consultancies combined. But the way in is harder for that smaller agency, which basically is competing with the numbers that they can't match.
I think this is a perennial question, and it doesn't apply only to digital services. I think that, you hear from the European Commission always, SMEs are the backbone of the European economy, etc. But when it comes to sort of putting the money where the mouth is, like, basically, what are you doing to enable some of these smaller companies to compete for bids? And I think, I don't have an easy answer for that. I think that when it comes to smaller companies making contributions, for example, I think that there is an opportunity in the upcoming revision to promote something like more like sustainable open source, and I would like to see the explicit possibility for a contracting authority to give preference to a company that shows that they're making a meaningful contribution upstream, and that they are that they have a standing within an open source project, and so that you would get explicit points for being able to show this. The other thing I think is that there are, of course, possibilities to participate in this kind of procurement hubs and things like that. That's more on the kind of on the SME side, that maybe teaming up for bids, etc., is a possibility. But fundamentally, I think it comes to more and more when I'm talking about these things, it's not about mandating specific things. It's about educating contracting authorities, actually, and individual procurement officers. I think the more understanding you have on the inside, the more you can use like procurement as a strategic tool. And maybe then you also understand and would value having working with partners where you are more equal, where you can have a collaborative relationship, if you're talking to the really big companies, you wouldn't have this kind of understanding. So I think, it comes down to, again, I think we need also to improve education for procurement officers. And I had the conversation about this just last week about hearing about the examples from the US, where actually this is a mandatory requirement to have a quite extensive education on how you can kind of leverage more public buying, etc. And somebody told me, I have no expertise, but that in the US, it's, if you're a procurement officer, it's the only job in the federal, like, where you can go to jail, basically. Just so the pressure is on procurement officers, but they also need to, with that comes education.
I would add, if I may, that in theory, no, actually, even in practice, public institutions have a duty, a mission, and have the right to promote policies as part of their procurement. So not only as part of grants, because now we are talking mostly about procurement, not grants, just procurement, tenders, development, not research. So they do have the possibility, authorities and the European Commission and national governments and regional governments, they have the possibility to promote policies as part of their procurement. There are specific forms of procurement for innovation. There are specific forms of procurement to promote environmental priorities or social priorities, like promoting local jobs, all these kind of things, which are not always related to the topic of a specific tender. So some authorities are doing this. Even in the participation, we were talking about some more strategic priorities. When we talk about open source, it might not be in the immediate interest of a specific project to implement an open source, but maybe it is in a longer strategy of an authority to promote open source, as France has been doing with their own sovereign tools for during the past weeks. It is a strategic national priority, even if on the short term, they have a problem with implementing different tools from their current stack. And one of the priorities that the European Commission has been pushing a lot, especially into the procurement tender, is the recommendation, into the procurement methodology, is the recommendation that authorities also help smaller companies, SMEs, small, medium companies, micro enterprises, to participate more. And there are a number of recommendations from the European Commission and the Council and the European institutions on how this can be done. For instance, they recommend to lower the barrier, to split contracts into several lots so that the minimum turnover would be lower, and so on and so on. There is the European standard forms for procurement that have been introduced as well. Is this working in practice? And it is an interesting question, and I will share now a slide from, actually we had a webinar last week organized with Toro Ventures as part of a European project, Eclipse, and we were talking about SME participation and how can SMEs and small innovative companies participate more in public projects. The reality is that SMEs have a low participation, especially micro enterprises. You see here 4% go to micro enterprises, even if micro enterprises form the big majority of companies and are the biggest employer in Europe. And we also, so it is an issue. And we also did our own analysis, by the way, from Hermix data. We looked at specific markets, big countries, and even European institutions to check if it is true that there is a trend to lower the value of individual contracts. It's not true. We tested several markets for trends during the past 4 or 5 years. The average value of tenders is growing. So in practice, authorities on several markets that we tested are increasing the value of individual projects. And actually, I have to put it very bluntly, the European Commission Digit is doing the same. They have recently issued more and more huge contracts, not hundreds of millions, we are talking about billions, and a lot of these procurements are less and less transparent. For instance, a lot of the procurement of Digit and other directorate generals now are not open. They are dynamic purchase systems, which block the visibility and the participation to individual specific tenders and specific contracts, which are organized under the umbrella of a DPS. So in practice, sorry that our data shows that there is not a clear trend to lower barriers to participation or to lower the value of individual tenders. We are in practice still locked in what you were saying earlier.
Maybe if I can add, not everything. I mean, not that you, Stefan, sound negative. Not everything is so gloomy. What I do see is, for an average, it could be a conclusion to what we had today. For an average Drupal agency, 50, 60, 40 people, what is the best possible way to get in? It would be wishful thinking that that there is a tender for, I don't know, a European public institution, and that you can do that on your own, because sometimes the demands go way beyond just the implementation or the support and maintenance of an existing Drupal website or platforms. The demands can be anywhere from preparing newsletters and so on, communication strategies and so on, which obviously your typical Drupal agency isn't
sorry to jump in. Very relevant. What you said is very relevant. Sorry to jump in only for 2 seconds. In my experience and the experience of doing this kind of large tenders, the biggest barrier for a company to enter into a public procurement, into a public contract, is not actually the turnover or other formal requirements. Because as you were also saying earlier, and we have discussed between ourselves as well, there are ways to go around this. First is partnerships. Find partners, put more partners in a consortium. This way you get a bigger overall turnover, more certifications, more CVs. Also, you can rely on the capacity of additional partners, on the capacity of subcontractors, or even you can rely on the capacity of third parties. So the European procurement regulations allow you to join forces, to get additional resources in order to comply with these formal requirements. This is not the biggest barrier. The biggest barrier is the effort. Because a smaller company, a micro enterprise, or a small enterprise has less resources to allocate to writing a complex tender. It's effort, it's cost, and the cost is huge. And this is one of the things that I actually have in mind when we design Hermix. We need to lower also and help lowering the cost of participating to tenders through automation, and also to choose the best battles. Because there are, as I was telling you, we have 3,000 new tenders every day. In my market, IT for international European institutions, I had maybe 200 tenders per year. I did not have the capacity to write 200 tenders per year. Nobody has, not even the huge corporations can write 200 tenders per year. It's impossible. You need to choose how many can you do, 5 or 10. If you are a huge corporation, you do 20. And you need to choose which is that one tender or those 3 tenders that you want to fight for, where you have the best chances. In order to decide this, you need what we call a bid no bid decision, a technical qualification or pre-qualification, to understand if you have the best combination of market position, technology, and capacity to deliver.
I mean, I definitely agree, but there's always some, let's call it, some hidden, maybe not necessarily criteria, but there is something that you cannot see with your eyes. I don't know, maybe the client is unhappy with the current vendor. That's not like public knowing. So you really cannot just say, okay, fine, they have been working with the same client, with the same consortium for 3 contracts, framework contracts now. Maybe something happened in the last one. So it's a bit difficult to basically just say, okay, this one we're gonna left out because obviously we've seen for 6 years it was the same vendor. The likelihood of them moving away is close to zero. But again, you really cannot say that. So there's always that one part of the unknown that basically you do have to treat every potential, especially if we speak just about a Drupal agency that will go into a tender where there is a clear sign that we will be dealing with Drupal, that you don't grab such a chance and form a bigger partnership, a strong partnership with which you can compete against the incumbent and against any potential competitors. Any more questions anywhere?
I think we are already way past our time. It was
Yeah.
wonderful to be here. I really want to thank you again for inviting and organizing this. And it is obviously this event was facilitated by the event of 2 weeks ago. And it was a pleasure to meet you there as well. The Drupal for Gov conference organized by the European Commission with your support. I was only a participant there. It's a great follow-up on the discussions at the Drupal for Gov conference in EU in Brussels of 2 weeks ago, I think.
Thank you, Sachiko, Stefan, for your incredible insights, and to all of you for joining us here today, and wishing you a great Thursday afternoon.